The cabin lights glared gold across the polished leather of first class, every reflection cutting sharp lines as passengers shuffled down the narrow aisle. The engines hummed low, steady, the kind of vibration you feel in your chest before takeoff. I had already taken my seat, posture straight, earbuds tucked into one ear, my hands resting on my lap with the calm precision of habit. 70 years had made me no stranger to travel, nor to confrontation. The air smelled of disinfectant, stale but sharp, and the faint hiss of the closing jetway sealed the room like a vault. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. Tell me your city, your country, and what time it is there. Let's see just how far this story travels. First class wasn't a luxury to me. It was earned. Each wide cushion and extra inch of legroom was a small nod to years of service, discipline, and sacrifice. I closed my eyes, prepared to settle into silence, when a voice sliced the air like a bayonet through canvas. "Excuse me, that's my seat. Move." I opened my eyes, and there she was. Luna, 40-something, broad-shouldered, her burnt orange blazer straining at the seams, a cheap imitation of class. Her face was locked in a sneer, long wavy hair framing a glare that carried entitlement heavier than her luggage. She jabbed her finger at me, not like a request, but like a sentence handed down from a crooked judge. "This is 2A. That's my ticket. You don't belong here." My gaze stayed steady. Calm. I drew one earbud out and glanced at my boarding pass resting in the pocket beside me. The numbers were clear, unshakable. I raised my eyes and let my words land with authority. "No, ma'am. This is my seat." The reaction was immediate. Her face flushed deep crimson, mouth tightening into a smirk fueled by arrogance. She snapped her fingers at the nearest flight attendant, waving her ticket like a weapon. "Check this. He's in my seat. I don't know what scam he's running, but this belongs to me." The attendant, a young man already worn thin by long hours, compared the two passes. Silence stretched as he scanned the numbers. Then, flat and final, he said, "Ma'am, your seat is 14C. This seat belongs to him." Luna's jaw dropped. She stammered, shook her head, then barked back. "That can't be right. Check again." "It's right," the attendant said, his tone clipped. He moved on, but she stayed rooted in place, fury rising with every second she wasn't obeyed. She leaned in close, lowering her voice, but the venom cut through the entire cabin. "Listen, old man, I don't know what scam you pulled, but you don't belong here. Look at you. You don't fit." Her words hit like a slap, echoing off the silence that fell around us. Passengers shifted in their seats, some craning their necks, others pretending not to notice. But I noticed the phones. Already lifted, already recording. Years of training told me, do not react. Not yet. Her anger was her weapon. I would not sharpen it for her. "You have a seat waiting," I said evenly, but she ignored it, planting herself square in front of me, blocking the aisle with the stubbornness of a barricade. "I won't sit back there like some commoner," she spat. "I paid for first class. I deserve comfort, and I'm going to have it." Passengers sighed audibly now, frustration rolling through the cabin. But Luna thrived on attention. She mistook every glance for validation, every sigh for fuel. Her voice rose higher, sharper. "Kick him out. He doesn't deserve this seat. Do you know who I am?" I tightened my grip on the armrest, pulse steady, not from fear, but from control. She was testing, probing, convinced her noise could bend the rules of steel and paper. "Sir, are you going to move?" she demanded. "No," I said, just one word. Solid. Final. That single refusal sent her spinning into a louder tirade. "Unbelievable! I'm being harassed on my flight! Everyone's watching this!" Groans rolled through the rows. "Sit down, lady," someone muttered. Another. We just want to leave. Still, Luna refused to back down. Her arrogance thickened like smoke, choking the cabin. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Because what she didn't know was this. Her tantrum was setting the stage. Her arrogance was building the rope. And the moment was coming when that rope would tighten, not around me, but around her. At 70 years old, I didn't need a stranger in a cheap blazer to tell me where I belonged. My life had already been measured, tested, and weighed in places far more hostile than a pressurized cabin. I had seen deserts burn beneath relentless suns, heard the whistle of mortars in the night, felt the ground tremble beneath the weight of armored columns. Those years had etched discipline into my bones. I didn't ask for respect. I had earned it. Service had no shortcuts. I had enlisted when I was barely more than a boy, raised by a father who wore his own uniform until the day he died, and a mother who held the home together with the quiet strength only military families understand. My career spanned decades, not just battles fought abroad, but endless hours of planning, training, and discipline. 30 years in the United States Army. Countless deployments. Rank achieved not through privilege, but through blood, grit, and precision. That's why first class was not indulgence, it was acknowledgement. Every wide seat and polished surface reminded me of sacrifices made, men who never came home, comrades whose names are carved into stone. To sit here was not to flaunt wealth, but to honor the price already paid. Luna didn't understand that. She had never stood at attention while the names of the fallen were read aloud. She had never saluted a flag draped across a coffin. To her, status was something purchased, borrowed, or faked. To me, it was forged, unbreakable, stamped in every scar I carried beneath my jacket. Before this flight, I had already been introduced to the crew quietly at the gate. Veterans were noted, acknowledged, a small but formal gesture airlines often extended. I didn't seek it, but I respected it. Documentation had already been verified. Identification, service record on file. There was no doubt who I was or where I belonged. And yet, here she stood, trying to strip it away with nothing but noise. Luna wasn't just a passenger. She was every HOA Karen I'd ever seen. People who mistake volume for authority, who thrive on intimidation, who weaponize rules they barely understand. I had seen her type in neighborhood boards that wielded power like a cudgel, punishing homeowners over the color of a mailbox or the height of a fence. Their arrogance ran unchecked until someone stood up, someone with the backbone to fight back. And backbone is something 30 years in uniform carves into a man. My neighbors back home knew this well. When the HOA tried to force retirees to remove flagpoles, I stepped forward with federal code in hand, citing the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005. They backed down, not because they respected me, but because the law gave them no ground to stand on. Authority was not in volume. It was in knowledge, discipline, and precision. Sitting there in 2A, I recognized this battle was the same. Different setting, same principle. A self-appointed tyrant barking orders, convinced she could bend the world with her voice. But what Luna didn't know was that authority is not claimed. It is proven. Her voice rose, sharp, dripping with contempt. She wanted the cabin to see an old man stealing what wasn't his. What she didn't realize was that she had walked onto a battlefield she could not win. Every veteran learns patience. You don't charge into an ambush head first. You wait, you measure, you let the enemy make their move. And Luna was making every mistake possible. With every insult, with every shriek, with every demand to the crew, she was building her own case against herself. Phones recorded, witnesses muttered, evidence piled higher with every passing second. Authority is not loud. Authority is steady. It's in the calm tone of an officer giving orders while chaos rages. It's in the quiet confidence of a commander who knows his plan will succeed before the first shot is fired. That was the authority I carried in my chest as she spat venom inches from my face. And in that silence, something else began to shift. The cabin, once unsure, began to tip in my direction. Passengers frowned at her antics. A man behind her muttered, "Another one of these." A woman across the aisle rolled her eyes, whispering to her companion. Each reaction was small, but together they formed a tide. She thought she was strong-arming an old man. What she didn't know was that every word she screamed tightened the noose she had built around her own reputation. She was no longer in control. The authority she believed was hers was already gone, and the cabin knew it, even if she didn't. I had seen dictators collapse like this before. Loud, arrogant, certain of their invincibility, until the weight of truth crushed them in an instant. And here, in this cabin 30,000 feet from nowhere, Luna was writing her own downfall line by line. She was about to learn what true authority looked like. Luna wasn't new to this kind of performance. People like her never are. You don't just wake up one day and decide to bark orders at strangers in public. That kind of arrogance is forged over years of unchecked behavior, sharpened through petty victories, and a community too exhausted or too intimidated to resist. I had seen her kind sitting on HOA boards across the country, drunk on the illusion of power. HOA Karens didn't need uniforms or badges. They wielded covenants and bylaws like weapons. They told veterans they couldn't fly the flag they fought for. They fined parents because a child's bicycle leaned against the garage door. They stalked their neighborhoods with clipboards and smug grins, convinced they were sheriffs patrolling the frontier of suburbia. Luna's behavior in that cabin wasn't a tantrum. It was the same muscle memory she had built from years of abuse, escalating her voice, intimidating strangers, spinning lies until people caved just to silence her. She was used to winning by exhaustion, by grinding her opponents down with noise until they surrendered. I knew her type well. HOA Karens built themselves into local empires. They stacked their boards with loyalists, bullied homeowners into submission, and forged connections with local politicians to shield their corruption. They thrived in the shadows of technicalities, twisting clauses and codes into tools of harassment. And when challenged, they doubled down, convinced their authority was absolute. That's what made them dangerous. Not their intelligence, but their persistence, their obsession with control. They didn't just want power, they needed it. Without it, their identity collapsed. I remembered a neighbor years back, a widower fined $250 for leaving his trash can at the curb one day too long after his wife's funeral. The HOA board, led by a woman just like Luna, refused to waive it. "Rules are rules," she had said, her smile as cold as the fine print she hid behind. That wasn't governance. That was cruelty wrapped in bureaucracy, and cruelty was Luna's lifeblood. She thrived on attention, on the spotlight, on the whispers of discomfort from the crowd around her. The more resistance she faced, the louder she grew. It wasn't about the seat. It was about dominance. She wanted the cabin to bow, to see her as untouchable, to validate her illusion of status. But arrogance always leaves a trail. I didn't doubt that Luna had pulled this stunt before, maybe not in first class, but in meetings, in offices, in neighborhoods. People like her left scars on communities. They racked up enemies quietly, each one adding to the ledger of resentment, waiting for the day justice finally arrived. And justice always arrives. HOAs weren't meant to be tyrannies. They were supposed to preserve property values, maintain order, give neighbors a voice in how their communities thrived. But in the wrong hands, they became fiefdoms. And Luna, she was the embodiment of that rot. 40-something, straining against her blazer, Hiding behind counterfeit brands and fake confidence, she had probably spent years lording over people who couldn't fight back. But she had made a fatal mistake this time. She mistook silence for weakness. She saw an old man and assumed compliance. She didn't realize that silence can be the sharpest weapon, that patience is a soldier's greatest ally, and that authority doesn't raise its voice. It waits for the perfect strike. As she raged, I thought about the federal codes I had cited back home, the legal filings that had dismantled HOA boards brick by brick, the Fair Housing Act, the Federal Aviation Administration's authority over seat assignments, the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act, laws written not for spectacle, but for justice. Those laws were the true power, the kind that outlived arrogance and exposed corruption for what it was. And Luna's arrogance was about to meet the same fate. Passengers shifted, groaned, muttered under their breath. Phones glowed, recording every gesture, every shriek, every insult. What she thought was power was nothing but a noose tightening around her reputation. And like every HOA Karen before her, she couldn't stop herself. She doubled down, shouting louder, demanding more, trying to claw back control she never truly had. HOA power structures collapse the same way. Slowly at first, then all at once. Years of unchecked abuse build pressure, and when it bursts, it destroys everything in its path. I had seen entire boards forced to resign, neighborhoods rally against the tyrants who once terrified them. And always, at the center of the wreckage, there was a Karen like Luna, standing defiant until the very end, convinced she was still untouchable even as the walls crumbled around her. That was the stage she had built for herself in row 2 of this aircraft. She thought she was in command. She thought her voice carried weight. But what she didn't understand was that her performance had already stripped her of the one thing she needed most: legitimacy. And once legitimacy is gone, all that's left is noise. Authority isn't loud. Authority doesn't need to raise its voice. True authority rests in the lines of federal codes, the weight of signatures on documents, the quiet finality of rules that no tantrum can bend. And as Luna's shrieking rattled the cabin walls, I already knew the ground beneath her was vanishing, inch by inch. The boarding pass was not just a slip of paper. It was a contract backed by federal regulation. Under Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, every passenger is assigned a seat. That seat isn't optional. It's not negotiable. It is law. Airline manifest lists are verified against identification at the gate, cross-checked, then transmitted to the crew. Luna's ticket didn't say 2A. It said 14C. That alone was ironclad. But entitlement doesn't read federal code. It shouts, it bluffs, it throws noise into silence, hoping volume will overwhelm truth. She waved her arms, demanded the attendant check again, as though reality could be reshuffled by her insistence. But the manifest was immutable, a digital record already locked and secured. And behind that, my own credentials sat heavier still. Before boarding, the airline had noted my veteran status. Documentation was confirmed. The captain already had my name, my rank, and my service years on file. That was the part Luna never saw coming. The intercom announcement that would echo through the cabin later wasn't an afterthought. It was procedure. Airlines regularly honor service members before flights. It was already set in motion before Luna ever pointed her finger at me. She had staged a war she could never win, and the verdict was already written. Phones gleamed in the cabin, raised higher now, capturing her every lunge, her every shriek. Evidence was multiplying. Digital proof not just of harassment, but of her unraveling. In the modern age, reputation isn't destroyed behind closed doors. It's dismantled under the unblinking eye of hundreds of cameras. Each recording would live forever, each file a brick in the case against her arrogance. I had spent years in intelligence, studying surveillance, gathering proof that shifted the outcomes of missions. And here, without lifting a hand, I watched the same process unfold. Every insult, every stomp of her foot, every wild accusation was preserved. Witnesses lined the aisle, trapped by her tantrum, their sighs and muttered complaints building into a chorus that would weigh against her. The law was never on her side. Federal Aviation Regulations, Section 121.580, prohibits interference with crew members and disruptive behavior that delays or jeopardizes flight operations. She was guilty of both before we even left the ground. The attendant had warned her, once, twice, 3 times. Each refusal etched her deeper into violation. By law, they could have her removed before departure, escorted out in disgrace. And yet I waited, because I understood timing. You don't strike early when patience can deliver total victory. What Luna didn't realize was that her enemy wasn't me. It was the very system she thought she could bend. FAA regulations, airline procedures, military recognition protocols, federal statutes woven together like a net. She was tangled already, but her arrogance kept thrashing, tightening the knots. Passengers saw it. One muttered, "She's digging her own grave." Another whispered, "This is going viral the second we land." The weight of public opinion shifted, tilting hard against her. The same spotlight she craved was turning into a furnace. She barked louder, claiming fraud, accusing me of scamming the system. The irony was almost poetic. I had spent 3 decades serving under laws, under discipline, under codes written not for comfort, but for survival. She had spent her life fabricating status, clawing for respect she never earned. And now, in this cabin sealed 30,000 feet above the ground, her world was colliding with mine. The evidence stacked itself. The boarding pass, the manifest list, the crew's testimony, the FAA regulation on disruptive passengers, the passenger recordings, and soon, the captain's intercom announcement of my service record. One by one, they formed a chain of authority she could not break. The flight attendants whispered near the galley, their tones urgent but professional. I caught fragments. Security, delay, removal. Words that spelled the end of her charade. But I didn't move. I didn't interrupt. Because I knew that the perfect strike hadn't landed yet. Luna leaned in again, her phone raised high, recording her own rant. She thought she was seizing control of the narrative, painting herself as the victim of injustice. But she didn't understand the digital battlefield. Once uploaded, once shared, the truth in those videos would speak louder than her lies. Public opinion doesn't need explanation when arrogance is caught raw on camera. And still, the captain's voice had yet to cut through. That was the hammer waiting above her head. The recognition of my name, my rank, my 30 years of service, broadcast to the entire cabin. A moment she could not shout over, could not twist, could not undo. I had waded through firefights where timing meant survival. This was nothing. This was patience, discipline, strategy. Let her scream. Let her claw. Every second she bought was another nail in the coffin of her credibility. The evidence was in place. The law was written. The witnesses were watching. The cameras were rolling. And the intercom was primed. She thought she was in command. She thought her words carried weight. But the truth was already set. And when the announcement came, it would land with the force of a gavel. Undeniable. Final. Absolute. Luna's voice clawed through the cabin, louder, shriller, a performance spiraling into madness. She had crossed the line from irritation to spectacle. the aisle clogged with passengers trapped behind her, their bags hanging heavy, their patience thinner than the recycled air pressing into our lungs. Phones no longer hid in laps. They were raised openly now, lenses trained on her like rifles waiting for a target. "You don't belong here," she screeched, jabbing a finger toward me. Her bracelet clinked against, the armrest like shackles of her own arrogance. "You probably lied to get this seat. People like you scam the system." The words cut sharp. Not at me. I had long since grown immune to insults, but at the crowd. Gasps hissed through the rows. A man muttered, "That's too far." Another leaned forward, whispering, "She's finished." Her arrogance didn't see it. She doubled down, her voice shaking the silence, her arms waving like banners of chaos. "This is harassment. You're all watching it. He's harassing me." But no one bought it. Passengers groaned louder now, their irritation shifting into hostility. A chorus rose. "Sit down, Karen. We just want to leave. Stop holding us up." Still, she pressed forward, desperate for control. Her phone tilted higher, red record light blinking, her own camera capturing the implosion she mistook for victory. She spun herself into the role of martyr, convinced the internet would crown her a victim. But what she didn't understand was that she was painting her own humiliation live, immortalizing every tantrum, every insult, every stomp of her foot. The attendant returned, patience frayed, voice firmer. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. Take your seat or security will be called." "Security? For me?" she shrieked, eyes wide with indignation. "You should be dragging him out, not me." The aisle trembled with the groans of passengers still waiting to sit. Tension pressed like a storm cloud, heavy and electric. Every second she refused to move delayed the flight, costing the airline time, money, reputation. She didn't care. She thrived on chaos. She thought volume was victory, but volume is nothing against law. She stamped her foot, blazer shifting with each dramatic gesture. "Do you know who I am?" she barked, spitting the cliché every tyrant clings to when they feel power slipping away. Silence answered her. Silence and the sharp click of another phone recording. I sat motionless, hands folded, pulse steady. Not indifference, calculation. I had learned in battlefields far harsher than this that restraint can wound deeper than aggression. My silence was the mirror that reflected her madness back at her, and the passengers saw it. They saw me still, calm, disciplined, and her, unraveling thread by thread. The crowd shifted, the tide turning. Murmurs rose into mutters, mutters into chants. "Sit down, Karen!" echoed sharper, bolder. Someone barked, "We're not leaving until you move." Another, "Enough already." But Luna mistook resistance for spotlight. She puffed her chest, smirked, raised her voice another octave. "Fine, record me. Everyone will see how I'm mistreated." And in that instant, she gave them exactly what they wanted. A meltdown broadcast in high definition. I almost pitied her. Almost. The attendant whispered with his colleague near the galley, fragments of urgency slipping into earshot. "Captain, security, delay." The words painted the picture clear. The trap was closing. And then it happened. The intercom crackled, cutting through Luna's shriek like thunder across a battlefield. The captain's voice rolled deep, commanding without effort, calm with the weight of unshakable authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we depart, we would like to take a moment to recognize the veterans traveling with us today. We are honored to welcome Mr. My Name, 30 years of service in the United States Army. On behalf of the crew and our passengers, we thank you for your service." Silence. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the cabin erupted. Applause thundered through the rows. Cheers rose. Passengers leaned out of their seats to clap, to shout their thanks, to glimpse the man who had sat silently through the storm. Phones swiveled, recording not Luna's shrieking face but my calm composure, framed now in dignity and respect. I inclined my head, just slightly, a modest nod, chest steady though pride carried its weight deep inside. My silence spoke louder than any words could. Luna froze, the color drained from her face, her smirk shattered, replaced by disbelief. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The phone in her hand trembled, its red recording light still blinking, but now it captured her collapse. That's not real, she stammered. He's lying. He made it up. The attendant stepped forward, manifest in hand. It's real, ma'am. Verified before the flight. Laughter rippled through the rows, sharp and merciless. Passengers who had groaned in frustration moments earlier now jeered openly. "Sit down, Karen!" someone shouted again, this time with fire. "Show some respect," another echoed. Her authority dissolved like sand through open fingers. She tried one last desperate performance, raising her chin, injecting defiance into her trembling voice. "I paid for this seat. I deserve this seat. He doesn't." But the cabin wasn't with her anymore. They weren't neutral. They weren't tired. They were united. A storm of boos crashed over her words, drowning her shrieks. "You deserve economy," one man barked. Another added, "or the sidewalk." Her performance collapsed under the weight of the crowd. What she thought was dominance had turned into humiliation. And then the attendants moved in. "Ma'am, return to your assigned seat or you will be escorted off this plane." Her chest heaved, blazer shifting as she glared around for allies. There were none. The room had already chosen sides, and still she spat her last card. "I'm not moving. If he stays, I'm leaving." It was the last mistake she would make. 2 uniformed security officers appeared in the aisle, summoned quietly during her tirade. Their presence drew a wave of murmurs, phones raised higher to capture the climax. One officer's voice carried the weight of final authority. "Ma'am, please come with us." "No, this isn't fair," she shrieked, twisting away, clutching the seat back like a child. Her designer bag slipped from her shoulder, spilling across the floor. A wallet, cosmetics, and sunglasses clattered out. Cheap knockoffs, crooked logos mocking the luxury she pretended to own. Laughter exploded through the cabin, sharp as gunfire. The facade was gone. She scrambled to gather her things, face burning red, sweat streaking down her temple. But the officers were already guiding her, their grip firm, their authority absolute. She thrashed, voice cracking, desperate to cling to the spotlight that had turned into her execution stage. "You'll regret this, all of you! You can't treat me like this!" Her words dissolved into the roar of approval from the passengers. Applause rose again, not just for my recognition but for her downfall. "Bye, Karen!" someone yelled, and the chant spread, echoing through the cabin until it thundered louder than her shrieks. The door closed behind her. And just like that, the storm broke. The cabin, once strangled by tension, breathed again. Laughter, relief, conversations spilling into the silence she left behind. I sat still, hands folded, earbuds resting against my chest. Around me, nods of gratitude, smiles of respect. A woman across the aisle leaned in, her voice softer than the storm had been. "Thank you for your service, and for your patience." Another offered to buy me a drink once we were in the air. Respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And in the silence after her removal, the cabin knew the difference. Authority does not strike quickly, it strikes cleanly, and once it lands, There is no recovery. Luna thought she had staged a spectacle she could control, but what she built was a courtroom she could never escape. Every witness in that cabin was a juror. Every phone recording was a sworn affidavit. And the verdict had already been written before the first wheel lifted off the runway. Airlines don't treat disruptions as inconveniences. They treat them as federal matters. Under FAA regulations, interference with crew operations is a violation that follows you far beyond the terminal. Reports are filed, incidents documented, names recorded. Security doesn't escort you off a plane so you can disappear quietly. They escort you into a system that remembers. Luna's arrogance had just painted a target on her back, and the system would not forget. I had seen this process before. In combat, we gathered intelligence, documented violations, built cases that toppled insurgent networks. Here, the procedure was no less thorough. The attendants had logged the incident. The captain had filed his note. Security had documented the removal. When that plane landed, the chain of paperwork would continue. Airlines communicate with federal agencies, with the Department of Transportation, with aviation security task forces. What Luna mistook for a tantrum was already a matter of federal record. And the evidence? Overwhelming. Dozens of passengers had filmed her meltdown. Every insult, every stomp of her foot, every shriek of, "He doesn't belong here." Once uploaded, those videos would spread faster than she could imagine, dissected frame by frame across every platform. Her name, her face, her arrogance, preserved in high definition. She had given the world the rope, and the internet would hang her reputation with it. This is the fate of every HOA Karen who believes noise is power. They bully neighbors with fines, twist bylaws into threats, scream about rules they don't understand. But when challenged with law, with federal code, with undeniable evidence, they crumble. Their kingdoms collapse. Their thrones dissolve into cheap plastic chairs in community halls no one respects anymore. Luna thought she was immune. But immunity is an illusion. The officers guiding her down the aisle didn't just remove her from a flight. They stripped her of legitimacy. No blazer, no shriek, no cheap handbag could mask the truth. The passengers weren't jeering at a stranger anymore. They were jeering at the symbol of corruption itself. Every "Bye, Karen" was not just for her, but for every bully who had hidden behind false power. And the humiliation didn't end at the gate. Airlines share their manifests. Disruptive passengers are flagged, sometimes blacklisted. Her name would ripple through the system like a warning siren. No longer just another traveler, but a documented problem. That was her legacy now. Not authority, not respect, but a file, a case number, a record of disruption etched into federal systems that don't forgive. What she didn't know, what people like her never know, is that once law wraps its hands around you, it doesn't let go. There are no tantrums loud enough to silence a federal report. There are no shrieks sharp enough to erase digital evidence. Passengers in the cabin understood this instinctively. That's why they applauded. Not just for me, not just for service, but for justice itself. They had witnessed arrogance destroyed by the very weight it mocked. I leaned back, earbuds resting against my chest, calm even as the cabin erupted in laughter and relief. Because I knew the truth. She had already lost more than a seat. She had lost her mask. The same way HOA Karens lose when neighbors fight back with legal filings, with state statutes, with federal protections. They scream about weeds in a yard, but the law reminds them of property rights. They threaten veterans over flags, but federal code crushes them into silence. They weaponize fear, but fear evaporates under sunlight. And when the collapse comes, it comes brutally, swiftly, leaving them scrambling in the ruins of their own arrogance. Luna was no different. She thought the plane was her fiefdom. She thought her voice could bend steel, override law, erase service. But when the captain's voice cut through, when federal authority sealed her fate, she stood revealed. A fraud. A tyrant stripped bare in front of 100 witnesses. Her cheap bag spilled across the aisle was more than an accident. It was symbolism. Her entire persona, luxury faked, authority fabricated, exposed in front of everyone she had tried to impress. And the laughter that followed was not cruel. It was justice. The chant of "Bye, Karen" wasn't just mockery. It was judgment. It was the verdict. In my years of service, I had seen villages freed from the grip of petty tyrants. I had seen crowds cheer when oppressors were toppled, when those who had ruled with cruelty were finally removed. And here, 30,000 feet above the ground, I saw the same pattern unfold. Different battlefield. Same justice. The law had done its work. The crowd had passed its sentence, and Luna had sealed her own downfall. The door shut behind Luna, and the cabin exhaled as one. The tension that had choked the air only moments earlier evaporated, replaced with the hum of relief, the buzz of laughter, the warmth of shared victory. Passengers leaned into one another, shaking their heads, chuckling, recounting every ridiculous gesture she had made. The storm was gone, and in its place bloomed something rarer: unity. For the first time since boarding, people weren't strangers packed into a pressurized tube. They were allies who had stood witness to arrogance destroyed. The chant of "Bye, Karen" still echoed in their voices, a phrase that would trail her far beyond this flight, stitched into every recording, preserved in every upload. Phones were already passing clips down the rows, laughter rippling as passengers replayed her downfall in real time. I knew what would happen next. By the time we landed, those videos would spread online, dissected and shared, mocked and magnified. Luna's face, her shrieks, her tantrum, all immortalized in digital memory, forever a warning to others who believed entitlement could bend the world. The attendants returned, calmer now, professionalism wrapped once more around their voices. One stopped at my seat, placing a glass of water on the tray. "Compliments of the crew," he said softly. "And thank you again." I inclined my head, my words measured, steady. "First class isn't where you sit," I said, half to him, half to myself. "It's how you carry yourself." He smiled faintly, nodding before moving on, and the simplicity of that moment carried more weight than any applause. Because that was the truth Luna never understood. Comfort is purchased, respect is earned, and arrogance, no matter how loud, is always temporary. As the engines roared and the plane rolled back from the gate, I glanced out the window. The tarmac stretched ahead, bathed in orange evening light. Behind me, laughter lingered, conversations bubbling with relief. The tension that had suffocated the cabin was gone, replaced with the shared satisfaction of justice done. Justice without shouting. Justice without lifting a hand. Justice delivered not by noise, but by patience, timing, and the steady hammer of truth. I thought back to every HOA tyrant I had ever seen. Every clipboard Karen who fined neighbors for flags. Every board member who threatened veterans with lawsuits. Every self-appointed monarch of manicured lawns. They all believed their power was absolute, and they all collapsed the same way, under the weight of their own arrogance. Luna had joined their ranks, not on a cul-de-sac, but in the sealed cabin of a jet. Her downfall wasn't a fine, or a board vote, or a resignation. It was public humiliation, broadcast to the world, cheered on by 100 witnesses. The HOA archetype had been dragged into the air and dismantled at 30,000 feet. As the plane lifted, city lights scattering like embers below, I let the rhythm of the engines settle into my chest. I closed my eyes briefly, letting peace wash over me. The storm had passed, but I knew it wasn't over for her. Somewhere, her videos were already being uploaded. Somewhere, her name was already trending, her face already mocked. The internet is relentless. Karma travels faster than any plane. And for someone like Luna, there is no return flight. She had demanded first class, but she never understood what it truly meant. She had sought authority through noise, but authority is never loud. Authority is steady. It is earned. It is unshakable. And when challenged, it doesn't scream, it waits. And when the time is right, it strikes with precision. That was the lesson she carried out of this cabin. Not in the seat she wanted, but in the humiliation she earned. Her collapse was complete. Her power was gone. Her legacy was sealed in laughter, in jeers, in chants of "Bye, Karen," echoing long after she disappeared. The passengers turned back to their seats, calm restored, and the journey resumed. I accepted nods, quiet thanks, offers of drinks from strangers who now understood a truth I had carried for decades. Dignity does not demand attention. It simply endures. And as the city lights faded beneath the wings, I knew this was more than a flight. It was a reminder that arrogance cannot survive truth, that noise cannot outlast law, that spectacle cannot defeat patience, and that first class, in the end, has nothing to do with where you sit.